this should be common sense, but I led with my strongest one because that's usually what hiring managers are going to click on first. So without going into every single one, I just wanted to show some quick highlights of what I did inside my case studies. Starting with a big image here, kind of really big text. I'm calling out certain things. You can kind of quickly see my navigation style. I knew that it would be a scrolling, so I wanted to keep these little navigators here where it says about and problem, project goal. One thing I did here was when you see my user personas and my sitemap, I didn't blow them up to be 100%. I'm actually scaling them down quite a bit. I didn't want to show what I did in my sitemap and my user personas. I wanted to show just that I did them and that I know what they are and they were important to my process. Things I did kind of blow up are areas here. And this is what I wanted to show you guys in this case study. So for every case study I attached a song lyric to it. I think this was kind of uniquely something I did where it shows a bit of my personality and my creative process at the same time, which I think is really important. So I kind of talk about how I'm a music person. I love music. I can associate those two things. They're part of my process. And then it just sort of leads into visual. And this, Here Comes the Sun is a common lyric. And then I can go into my mood board and style board and explain how the use of this yellow color is kind of representing that. Scrolling down, I show my final design and then going through there. So that's what the first project looks like. They all kind of share this similar flow through all of them, but real quick, I wanted to pop over to this one here and scroll down. So you can kind of see this stuff is coming in. And then again, I have the lyric here. And one thing that's different about this case study versus the other ones is I decided to put in my UI library. And again, it's scaled down. I'm not trying to show every single detail of my UI library here. I'm just sort of showing that I know and I can think through these processes, and it's an indicator to the hiring manager that, I kind of know how this goes. And I found out later with my job at Green Urbino that this section here is one of the big reasons I got hired. And it turns out I interviewed, in my many interviews with them, I interviewed with a developer who I now sit directly next to in our office pod. And she fought tooth and nail to get me hired because of this. So pro tip would be always be kind to your developers and show that you respect their job and that you want to stay organized and the process is important to you. So I wanted to kind of show that real quick. Goes through my final design. Yeah, so then popping up to the navigation here, I wanted to show quickly my about section. This is always super important for portfolios, in my opinion, because people hire you because you're qualified for the job and that you do good work, but people also hire you because they have to sit next to you all day. So it's really important that you show your personality here and you show your interests and things you like. I mean, you're going to be working with these people and they need to see that you're a normal person outside of your work. So I decided to showcase that here. The first part is sort of a written out version of my resume, where I went to school, that sort of stuff. And then the bottom portion here is something that stuck out to my current director. And she brings this up a lot, where I just sort of talk about what I like to do. I like going out to brunch. I like looking for the best eggs Benedict in the city, that kind of stuff. She thought that was really great, and she could see herself relating to me in that way. Down at the bottom, I have this extra detail where it's sort of my how to get in contact with me, that kind of stuff. And I ended up putting like best eggs Benedict in the city, and then a link there. And it turns out that she lives right next door to that restaurant. So during our interview process, we had a moment to like talk about stuff other than that, which I think is really important to connect with people in that way, just outside of your work. And then finally, one more thing I wanted to show was my process page. I think this is also really important too, because your process, just like your about page and your personality, is unique to you. And you should be able to explain your process, whatever it is, in about a minute or so. So it's good to show this stuff sort of like that you have a plan going into things. I think this shows hiring managers that you're organized, that you not only do the work and that you know what you're doing, but you've thought about how you're doing it and you want to be the most effective. So that's kind of how I showed mine. Yeah, and I think I talked really fast and went through all that, but that's what I got.
Look at this.
Is that?
Yeah, minutes still to go.
I did. Well, I can show one more case study really quick then in 2 minutes. So popping down here, so below this was my capstone project at the top. I decided to go into a restaurant project that I worked on. Well, I'm a UI designer and work in a web department now. I decided to show this project even though there's no web related to it, just because it shows my flexibility and print design, other stuff I can do. It has the same sort of layout as the other ones. These are good talking points. I put big visual pictures. I actually helped open this restaurant, and in part of the creative process, I did stuff like hang lights in this restaurant, menu design, that kind of stuff. This sort of stuff is important because it's also just good talking points. It's saying that, you know, I'm an all-around creative person. I can handle a challenge. We had to open this restaurant in like 3 months, which is a really short amount of time. It shows a lot of range. It shows a lot of just creativity, that kind of stuff. So just good, fun stuff to put in, I think, is a really good way of showing your personality outside of case studies with like nitty-gritty details of UI and UX.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
What was your design background before you came into the program?
I had a couple things. So I went to the Art Institute of Seattle and studied graphic design there. And then I also have a bachelor's degree in psychology. So I did design, and then I wanted to be a psychologist, and then I went back to design, which most designers have that 180 at some point in their life. So
great. Maria, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come back, and everybody's going to have a chance to ask some questions. All right, next is Sierra Kim, now works at Cisco, and but took the UX program, went through the UX program, finished, I think, 2 cohorts ago, recently. And I hope you will tell the story about the hackathon that you attended over a weekend.
Sure, yeah. So let's see. Sorry, I don't have my.
Okay. Sierra has a pretty interesting story, though, about pivoting, career pivot. I think one of the more drastic cases. Do you want us to come back to you?
Let's see here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I was a high school English teacher before becoming a UX designer. I didn't have any design background. I had no idea what UX design was. And so it was a complete 180 for me. But I was ready for a change. And when this felt like, when I found out about it, I looked into it, and it was a good time in my place for me to explore, and it aligned a lot with like kind of the new work that I wanted to do. So yeah, I was an English teacher. Before that, I was the whole thing, the master's in English education. Before that, I was an English major. So just complete like academic background all the way through and through. And only with SVC was like my big pivot into design. So that was my only exposure to design, or the beginning. And so like Ariel, like I had this kind of background with English, where I was able to kind of bring forth and say like this is also something that I can do. I can write, and I can also tell a story. And so one of my like big traits was that I could sell this. I could write a story. I can sell a story, and I understand how story can play a big part in designing and creating a product. And so these are my 3 case studies: Rover, Leap, and Orca. Leap is what Larry's referring to. At the time, in the year that I was at SVC, I took a leave from my English job I was still on contract. And I took a year leave to do this. And during that time, I noticed that I like had very little connections to like, you know, corporate world or, you know, jobs that I could like try out real projects or, you know, things like that. And so I discovered, you know, like there are hackathons, and I tried out, I participated in some, and LEAP was uh, an idea that I had pitched at a hackathon. The name of this hackathon escapes me right now, but and it was great to like, I recruited a little group, and we had won this this hackathon. And so it was both, and what was great about this was the idea that I had pitched was based on the need, a real need that I found out, and I discovered like while I was a teacher, but I just couldn't figure out a good solution for. And so the hackathon gave me a design approach to finding a solution to a real problem that I knew existed. So this is that project. Maybe I'll start actually from the beginning, like this, and this is the capstone project that I did. The reason why I have this first, even though that LEAP was, I felt like a stronger case study, was because I didn't have that company experience. And so Rover is a name in Seattle. And so I felt like this could say like I have this kind of background or experience to have worked with like an actual client, a business. The layout is pretty typical for your case study, you know, like the overview, the problem statement, the kind of the goal, the research. It's pretty standard. The one thing that I really focused on was being able to write good headlines and to be able to just read the headlines and get the story like in 60 seconds. So, you know, what is Rover? What's the problem? Pet owners keep getting turned away by sitters. So what was the goal? Reduce those denied requests. I dug in deeper with the sitters, and you could get, and what did they say? 1, 2, 3, 4. What was the epiphany I had? It's more about the fact that they're incompatible, like matching, as opposed to what Rover had initially thought was that it was the user's fault that they're not like posting their calendars correctly. And so that epiphany made me refocus what the solution should be, because the problem was different. I was inspired by dating apps to look at solutions. I went through, my approach was to create a survey to do a better matching between sitters and owners, and create the survey where I also, the reason why I also, the solution was bigger, but I honed on the survey because I could do two things. I could write a survey, which is not easy actually, and to basically showcase like I could write, and that I could use the tone and voice guide that the Rover had and align that survey with their business. And so showcase the solution and kind of bring it back to how this would change the overall interaction between the sitter and the owners, and a quick reflection at the end. And that's essentially kind of like the outline for all of these. For LEAP 2, again, I expect you to just read the headlines and get the story right away. What is LEAP? It connects students with community service opportunities. What's the problem? They have a hard time finding ones. It's because it's unhelpful, it's unengaging, and it's not, and it's disproportionate to those who don't have the advantage of like opportunities that their school may offer them. So what's the goal? The research that I did, and this was, it was impactful, the fact that I had access, unlike my colleagues who were actually at a job, who were able to pull projects from their actual jobs. Like I was able to actually go to my previous schools and go in and actually do user interviews with real people, with real students and teachers. Journey map, and then again, the key findings, you know, from that research: the lack of personalized opportunities, the fact that kids actually just trust the other kids for word of mouth, and kids do actually care about wanting to make their time, the opportunities that they choose to be worthwhile. So again, the approach for what the solution should be, and how I planned and processed that, and how the design came into the fold. As you can see, like I don't expect there may be a little bit more there are paragraphs in my case studies, and despite that, like I don't necessarily expect you to read that, but I hope that by the end of this, you know what the story is. And then my designs and the actual outcome, where I went back and tested the solution and bring it all back towards the end, and how I ended that study. And so the hackathon was the point where I did some quick pitching and prototyping, but then I went back and on my own did further to flesh out the problem, validate it, and redesign based on that new research, and test it again and prototype again and all that. And then the last was Orca, and this is like, again, this one is very specific to my writing skills. Again, the fact that I can organize writing, I can edit writing, and I can I did a quick storyboard to capture that story, and showcase how I redesigned the writing of the site. This case study, when I ended SVC, I only had the first two. I didn't have a third, and so I took another month to do this one. And this one got me an interview with Qualtrics, who was looking for a UX writer and a UX designer hybrid. But for my interviews, I wanted to work with Cisco because of my instructor who Cheryl, she's at Cisco, and I wanted to work with her, and so I lined it up where I would interview with her first, and Qualtrics like second, so that I wanted to push that one a little bit further, because it was in my heart to be a UX designer, like 100%, and instead of being a UX writer or UX designer hybrid. So yeah, that's pretty much my portfolio. Just a quick glance at like the keynote presentation. Unlike my portfolio that had a lot of words, the slides had almost nothing, like 0 words. And so it was me like telling the story, pulling out like the highlights on the slides, but other than that, no words, essentially.
I'm getting all misty-eyed over here.
Oh, why?
Seeing no words, it makes me happy.
Yeah, no words.
Hey, Sierra, Elena wanted to know that on your LEAP case, when you did the usability testing, were you talking to the same users that you talked to originally, or a different group?
Different. So with LEAP, I was very scrappy. The first round, I went to schools the second round, I had to get this done right away for my portfolio class. And I just like went to the local library, and I know what high school kids look like and what they do. So now I went to like, I just found high school students. I was like, hey, can you take a look at this? And I did a brief interview before, like, what's your experience? Yeah, so it was new for the most part.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Tai, I think you're up now, and we'll give you the full 15.
Oh
and
boy, yeah.
minutes left over for questions. Tai was a graduate, or is, I guess you will always be, a graduate of our UI visual design program. But we knew Tai, you'd taken classes here over the years in design. And I think this is true, Mariette can back me up on this, that Tai was part of the first UI visual design cohort that we ran.
That is correct.
Yeah, and what a star. You really, I mean it, just such a pleasure to have be around SVC. So thank you for coming back for this.
Yeah, well, thank you. And yeah, SVC, even before the certificate program, was always a great resource for me. So I'm going to share my screen really quick here. And this is my portfolio website. I'm going to actually be a little rogue here, and I'm not going to walk you through. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with my portfolio website here. You can see, similar to Maria, like, I introduced myself. I have 4 projects on my homepage. 3 of them are SVC projects, and 1 is from an actual work project. I do have more hidden in my navigation. Sorry, my Zoom controls are a little bit in the way here. But oops, wrong one. I have more projects hidden in my navigation here, and those kind of tell more about my process and stuff. But I really, on my homepage, wanted to focus on, like, being very, very clear and very direct, and just at a glance you can tell I'm a visual designer of digital projects. So that was my goal with my portfolio. But I'm actually gonna pivot here a little bit and share more about strategies for how I approach the writing case studies in my portfolio, how I use my deck in interviews. So I'm going to cover this stuff a little bit more instead. So about me, I am a UX designer for a healthcare software startup called Navigating Cancer. I've been there for about a year. But yes, I was in the UI and Visual Design Certificate program at SVC. I completed that in 2018 with this amazing group of badass ladies. And I want to take a step back and just go through kind of like my headspace when I enrolled in the SVC program, because I think that it really informed how I approached the classes and how I built my portfolio after that. So leading up to the SVC program, I kind of had been trying to get a new job for a year, like for over a year. And I was a traditional graphic designer, a lot of print-based background. And my goal was just to get a new job. And I was not effective in that. I was not getting a new job. I was not getting called back for interviews. So when SVC announced their certificate program, I knew at that time that, like, my portfolio did not have the kind of work in it that I needed to get a new job. You know, there were all these new titles like visual designer, UI designer, UX designer. It wasn't just graphic design anymore. So I went into the SVC program with the specific objective of getting projects for my portfolio to pivot my career. I think if you're still thinking about, oh yeah, I just want to get a new job, I'm really going to encourage you to get more specific about what type of job you want. Look at job descriptions, set up job alerts, save ones that you think, you know, this is the type of role that I want to be doing. Look at the keywords that they're using in those job descriptions, and make sure that your portfolio is selling yourself as qualified for, with, you know, those the skills and the values that they're looking for. This is a question. So what type of work do I include in my portfolio? And this is always like, you know, oh, I do photography, I do illustration, you know, like what do I include? And I would encourage you to make sure that it's really, really quick and easy for somebody to see what type of designer you are from your homepage. And I would use that as a guide for what to include in your portfolio. As far as actually building case studies, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but it will all tie together, I promise. Sierra kind of talked about storytelling a little bit too, and I really want to stress this, like your portfolio is going to help you frame stories that you want to tell about yourself, your design process, what you value as a designer, your unique perspective that you can bring to that company. And I think people sometimes discount the power that stories have for us as humans. Stories are really how we as humans like remember things. It's like really, really primal in our human brain. Like if you think about before writing was invented, how did we pass along our histories and our values? It was through oral storytelling. So when you tell a story, you are triggering something in somebody's brain to remember what you're saying. So you can really use the power of storytelling when you're crafting your case studies to really make sure that you're a memorable and standout candidate. So I want to take a tangent here. We're going to go off on a detour, and I want to talk about what makes a good story. So good stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I'm going to pick on visual designers here for a second because there are so many visual designer portfolios that I see that are just pretty screens. They are just the end. You're really, really missing an opportunity there to like make yourself a memorable candidate if you're not including the beginning and the middle. And if you've ever taken a writing class, there's a really, really common writing convention that we can actually overlay on top of this beginning, middle, and end that's going to help you make a super impactful case study. So if you've taken a writing class, you've probably heard about the hero's journey. Literally like Star Wars, Harry Potter, every single movie follows this same sort of plot, writing convention. So when you're setting up your case studies, think about the beginning of it. That's where you're setting up the problem. You're saying, here's the creative brief, here's the client problem. And then kind of like, I love this phrase, inciting incident in the hero's journey model, but it's like why was design needed to address this problem? In the middle of your case study, you're going to talk about your design process and any challenges that you face. And I really want to encourage you right here. It's okay to talk about things that did not go to plan. Like if you've ever designed anything, something happens where, you have to pivot. You get user feedback that your hypothesis is incorrect. You have to pivot the project. And it's really, really important that you share this because you want to be hired for roles where, they're not expecting that you're going to have the answers. They're going to hire you as a designer because they know that you can figure out the answers to their challenges. And so if you look at like kind of the hero's journey, this is like the part where like the stakes are raised and you're like, oh my gosh, look at this. How are they going to figure this out? And then the story kind of ends with like a climax at kind of the beginning and the end here. And this would be like your final screens, your deliverables from your project. This is where you show the beautiful and elegant solution that you came up with for that client's problem. And a lot of times, especially for student work, it's totally okay if you end your project here. You're telling a great story. If you do have any outcomes, kind of like what Sierra shared, like you have a quote from a happy customer, you have some metrics about how this actually impacted the business's bottom line, or if you say, hey, here's how we're going to measure if this is successful or not and iterate in the future, that will really help to build out the end of your case study. This seems like a lot of work, maybe you're thinking. It is, but I'm telling you this now because if you are enrolled in the SVC program right now, you know that final project that you're going to turn in on like week 8, 9, or 10 of your class is the climax of that story. So I encourage you while you're doing homework throughout the class period, like think about, where am I on the journey this week? What work am I creating this week that I can keep and put in my case studies? So that way, when it comes time to put your portfolio together, it's not this huge time suck to like go and gather all this content. Like you are ready to go because you've been gathering it along the way. So let's get a little bit back on track. That was my storytelling tangent. How do I use my portfolio in interviews? I know things are a little bit different right now because we're doing everything remotely and you're not really interviewing in person. But I found that by the time I get to like interviewing with like people that I'll be working with, it tends to be a lot more conversational. They just want to make sure that I'm not a weirdo. So if I want to bring up my portfolio in an interview, I have to find reasons to interject it into the conversation. And I'm really going to recommend that you find ways to do that. So I'm going to give you a couple strategies that I have found helpful. A really, really common interview question format is, tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with a colleague. Tell me about a time when you received negative criticism about your work and how you reacted about that. I used to hate these questions. I dreaded them. I would come into an interview, I'd feel very put on the spot trying to rack my brain for a relevant example. But like, let's look at this question for a second, right? Tell me about a time when. They're asking you to tell them a story. And we just filled your portfolio full of case studies that tell stories. So when they're asking you, tell me about a time you responded to negative feedback about your work, you can go back and you can say, yes, actually, I have a really great example of this in my portfolio where we received negative user feedback about a prototype. Let me tell you how we, shifted our design strategy and addressed that user need that we uncovered. Like, this is a really, really great way to use your portfolio and interject it into responding to questions. Another really, really common question that you'll get, and maybe not phrased quite, this way, but it's like describe your design process. So I really recommend, if you don't do like a process tab like Maria did, at least have one project in your portfolio that just does a really, really good job of like going through every single step of your design process. That way, when that question comes up, you can respond and say, yes, actually I have a really, really great project in my portfolio that I feel like does a good job of representing my design process. Let me take you through it. This strategy is going to work for you for a couple ways. Number one, because you're responding with stories, right? You're triggering that memory in the interviewer's brain, and it's kind of like think about like storybooks here, right? Like you are gonna you're showing pictures, right? You're walking them through your portfolio. So when you leave that interview, the interviewer is not going to be able to get you out of their head. They're going to be replaying all those stories that you told them in their head the rest of the day. And number two, you're going to look so incredibly prepared in an interview when an interviewer is maybe just expecting to have a conversation with you and like make sure that you're not weird, and you're like responding with like every single question with like, here's my process, here's how I do this. They're going to want to hire you because they're going to think, wow, this person came in so prepared. They're so professional. I'm going to look really good if I hire this person. So I really, really hope that you check out these strategies. I think they're super helpful. So just to recap kind of the top points that I mentioned today, I really think that it's important that you clarify your goals and what types of roles you want to be hired for, and make sure that your portfolio is specifically targeted for those roles. Versatility is important, but like you want to make sure that it's very, very clear that like you can do the job that you're applying for. Use the power of storytelling to make sure that you stand out with your case studies, and then really leverage your portfolio and that storytelling ability in interviews. So that's kind of what I have today.
You rebel, you.
I know, I went way rogue and did not stick to the brief.
But you're not weird. I think we covered that. That was really great. You should be a teacher, by the way.
We'll see.
Really, that was super well done. Hey, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to work in a question or two. So your task, people, is to raise your hand. I forgot how you raise your hand in Zoom. How do you do that? You don't know either? Well, you can, oh, there, that'll work. It's close enough. So go into the reactions button and you can signal that you have a question, and I will call upon you. And your job is to keep the question very compact and concise, and we'll try to do the same with the answers. So Emily, your thumb was up first.
Yes, I happen to be working on my, always working on my portfolio, and I want to, I was was recommended that I add some of those wireframes that we worked so hard on in the IXD class. I have some that I want to put in there. There's so many, and I'm not sure how to put them in there so they look nice. And I know I wouldn't put all of them in, but how do you do that? What any suggestions?
I'll route you to Sierra and Ariel for an answer on that.
I'll start, and then I'm curious what Sarah will say. I guess the answer I would go to there, it's a great question. I don't think it's a simple answer, but one thing I will say is it depends what story you're trying to tell in that case study. And so I think you have to start or get to that decision, and then it will be more clear where your wire. So maybe it's you're trying to tell a story about the pivot point where you realize you would go in one direction and it was the wrong direction, or you're trying to tell a story about some key decision that you made through those wireframes that impacted the rest of your work, or yeah. So I hope that's helpful, but I think that's how I would start to think about it.
Ariel, I was gonna say the same thing, that it's just choose the wireframes that highlight that point in the story of whether it's the problem or your realization or that turning point in the design. In fact, you know, the wireframes that I had, I actually had nothing to do with the actual design of the product. It was more to highlight my process and the fact that how I organize those wireframes. And I just wireframed that there's going to be a list, that there's going to be a form, that there's going to be a home, and then there's going to be like a modal. Like those are the only 4 pages that I'm going to recycle in my wireframes. And it was just like laser focused on the fact that like these are the essential 4 that I ended up which I think are really the only, like the essential 4 of any product. But it was just that it was versions of this, and I just did a hand drawn wireframe to say that this was just a process that I had.
Okay, thank you. Lillian, proceed.
Okay. We just finished our capstone project, and so this is kind of top of mind for me. When you've had group projects and you're showing that in your portfolio, how much do you focus on your own individual contribution versus the overall sort of end product that was done with the team?
Oh, I need to pick someone to answer.
I don't know if I asked that the right way, but like, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out like when a hiring manager is looking at this, how much of it are they, I mean, I'm assuming they are looking for my particular contribution more than, you know, the overall thing.
I think I'll go back to Ariel and Sierra for that, because in the UI program, we tend to work independently. So it's less of an issue. So Sierra, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that like, so the problem of like, for instance, Rover was group, but the problem discovery was a team effort. We each took interviews, we did the work to bring the findings together. But I kind of mentioned in passing that the survey, it was one part of the solution of a bigger solution, and like my teammates had different ways that they ideas for solutions, but the survey was my own, and so I chose to highlight a part of the solution that was actually just my own work. So like everything above was kind of, you know, it was a team effort. Yeah.
Similarly to Sierra, for my capstone project, it was actually really tricky. It's a good question because it's so tricky. In my case, I had this amazing partner and we were just like completely in sync. We were in step the whole time. It was really hard at the end to say, I did this, you did that. So when I came, I really, really struggled to say, like, what did I actually do that was just mine? And in the end, what I ended up doing was talking about, well, first of all, there was something I was proud of to share, like, this is the final work we did, this is how we did it. And there was a lot of we, but I knew I had to separate myself. I did this, I did that. And so the way I did that was focus on what I thought what I was most passionate about, even though we really had done everything together. Like, this was the moment that I really stood up and said, wait, what if we did it that way? Or, you know, maybe we should try this. And it was, I was maybe stretching it a little because we were so in sync, but you're always going to speak better about the things that you're passionate about. So I would lean into that.
Thank you. Cody, you had a question that we didn't get to, I think, or do you still?
No, not yet. This is like kind of portfolio related, but kind of just like UX on a bigger scale that's kind of specific to Ariel right now. It's like, as a UX writer, how do you manage both growth and essentially chaos at the same time when you have like all the stores that you're trying to open in New York, but you had one closing over here and then downtown just got busted up and stuff like that. So how do you, I didn't even know you guys were opening up places in New York, but that's a lot going on for, you know, a UX writer at a time.
Yeah, those are some hard-hitting questions, Cody. I feel like you're a journalist. No, it's great. So, well, just to be clear, like the New York stores opened, it was 6 months or a year ago. So we're past that point. But yeah, there's a lot of chaos, a lot of things happening with the brand. Scary time for retail in general. And interestingly, I think there's meant to be like, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 like UX writers, and right now we're working with 3. And my manager just got moved, so we're like really I think we're really, really proud of what we accomplished as like this tiny, mighty team in this really, really challenging, chaotic time. So yeah, it is really, really tough, but I think there's a lot to like be proud of. Like everything we do feels amazing because it's all so hard. And so we're really proud of what we are able to do. And I think it's definitely a challenge to like do that, practice that self-care, like lean on, you know, the resources we have and in each other and other teammates, just try to create a supportive environment.
Thank you. Everybody, Sierra has to go to a meeting. So if you have a Sierra specific question, this is a good time to ask it. And maybe Elena does.
I don't know if I have a Sierra specific question. I just was trying to raise my hand again. But if somebody else has a Sierra specific question, they should go right now. But I do have a question after that.
Okay, anything for Sierra? Okay, can we do this before she slips away? And that is say, just thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. This is really great information. Really good to see you.
Thank
Maybe
you,
Owen has a Sierra specific question. Let's find out. It's silent because you're muted, Oshin.
All right.
There you go.
The question I had, I mean, it's not really Sarah, but it could be more general, just in terms of passion projects. Projects that are not fully realized, but really kind of show your personality and kind of like where you want to go. So for instance, I have a project that's was really interaction design. And I was curious, what's the best way to kind of position that in an interview?
Who wants to take it?
Was it to like, was there a problem behind it?
So the class assignment was to basically kind of create an e-commerce site. So there was a bit of kind of, I took an existing site and kind of changed the formula for it to a degree. So it was taking, it was I love cars. It was taking a track day experience and kind of basically manipulating the overall site to kind of address a class assignment. So there's kind of an interesting twist to it in the sense that I wasn't really redesigning an existing site, but I was kind of addressing a class assignment.
Well, it sounds like the story is I love cars, and
oh yeah, that's definitely
I think
true.
that's a story, and there's a site that taps into that, and you have this personal experience, personal take on it, and that sprung up this inspiration to improve it, and how it's, so it sounds like that's the story, as opposed to I want to redesign this website to make it more user friendly. Like, it could be any website. So it's just the problem is kind of just goes back to something that you tie yourself into.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to answer that about side projects and personal passion projects?
I can come in really quick. I would think that if you have a project you're really passionate about and it somewhat fits in the category of being like showing your talents, always put it in, because people want to see that. People don't want to see that you like are just bored about what you're doing, and it always makes for a really good talking point. And in my portfolio, for example, I was out applying for UX UI jobs, but I have 2 case studies in there that are like restaurant related. And it's kind of weird. There was no digital at all in those projects. It was a lot of like menu design and signage and stuff like that. And while it does show creative, I was really passionate about it. And I think that came through in the interview, that I'm not one-dimensional. I'm not all digital. And you can always get creative and find a way to sort of intertwine them sometimes, maybe just sitting down and finding similarities. So with mine, I explained how I thought menu design was sort of like analog website design, where you have to have a hierarchy, and then I kind of put that all together. So I would always say put passion projects in for sure.
All right, thank you very much.
Cool.
I think Amy has a question.
Specifically for Ariel and Tai, you had amazing presentations that I feel like I would love to follow along with later. Would you be willing to send them out to us to be able to go through? Because I think both of those had great portfolio guidance.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the deck that I used with Larry, and he can pass it out to everybody here, and hopefully he will share out the recording too.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Star?
Actually, thank you, Amy, for asking that. That was exactly what I wanted. And also, just as somebody who got to like enjoy all of Ariel's goodness in school for a while, I wanted to say congratulations on something so amazing happening. And I can see why you're kicking it over there. That's incredible.
You're so sweet, Star. It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you. And also, like, what a teacher you are now.
Thank you.
Really amazing, you know? Beautiful. Also, I just loved everybody's presentations. And Tai, thanks for being the breakout and actually sharing more about what it would feel like to be interviewed. That was really incredible advice.
I'm glad that was helpful.
It was really helpful. And Sierra, I don't know if she's gone now, but.
She's gone, yeah.
It was great for her to make that call about the developers and understand like why it's important to show your assets and how you organize things. So lots of really incredible things to get to hear today. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Our last question gets to get back to you, Elena. So go ahead, please.
So, and I'm sure at some point we'll probably get to this in our portfolio class, but I'm finding myself in a place where the jobs that I thought I had are not actually panning out, and I'm starting to look into UX design, starting to actually try to build my portfolio right now. And so I had one small question and one kind of I don't know. So the small question is, what platform are you using to actually build your website on? Like, is it Wix? Is it Squarespace or whatever? And then the bigger question is, I'm seeing that most of y'all's portfolios, they look super high fidelity. Like, if I didn't know better on some of those, I would think that those were like websites that were live and being used currently. And I know some of them are, but some of them are just like concept pieces. And I'm wondering, because the things that we built out in our interaction design class, and it's not necessarily high fidelity for our individual projects. Is there an expectation that for your portfolio, it will be super high fidelity? And like, are you taking those pictures yourself? Are those like stock photos? Like what, that kind of stuff.
Those are good questions, and we don't have a whole lot of time for an answer, but we can just quickly hit each of you up on the platform that you use, and then we'll come back to the hi-fi question. So Ariel, your platform?
I used Wix. It doesn't matter what you use. I used Wix because there's a little more, it's harder than Squarespace, but there is more freedom to make it look a little more like me.
Tai?
I used WordPress, which definitely I think has a little heavier lift. I did have to purchase a professional like theme for it to get it to behave more like a portfolio. But I would also say that, you know, just use what you're comfortable with. Use a platform that you find easy to use.
And Maria?
I'm using Squarespace, but I broke it a little bit. So you'll notice that there's big, long bars. Those are actually 2 portals into case studies that I photoshopped the 2 photos together with no seam. So you can get a little creative with those sometimes.
So now who wants to take on the, wow, those examples sure looked hi-fi, and is that an expectation for us? And if you don't mind, I want Ariel to take the first crack at it, because that's a question that comes up more from the UX side, where some of us aren't trained as graphic designers, don't have that skill set.
Yes. So Elena and everyone, I had to stretch myself so much to make this look the way that I somewhat wanted it to. I cried a lot. And I had a lot of support from my teacher and classmates, which was great. But yeah, it seemed, according to my teacher, and I think he was right, it was really important to make this high fidelity. And that was a lot of work beyond the original like projects themselves. And I did use stock photography. I did take my own pictures. I did whatever I could to show visuals for the points I was trying to make and come up with a final portfolio that really I felt represented me. But I also think it's good to not be afraid to use some ugly things if those are the documents you have, you want to show your documents. So whenever you can, make those documents look sparkling good, but sometimes the messiness is good too, and just revealing your process.
Tai or Maria, do you want to throw in on that and where you got your photos?
I can chime in real quick. So some of the photos, especially the ones that I use for the restaurant case studies, I actually asked the photographer. So the company I used to work for paid a photographer to do those, and she was fine with me using them on the case studies, which was great. It is also like photos of the menus I designed, so she figured it was fine. And then with other case studies, in terms of high fidelity or not, I would say you don't need to. Like, messy is good. Like, if that's part of your process, I would say just make sure that it looks intentionally messy, that it's purposeful, that you're trying to show like you're in the middle of your process. If you have photos, you don't have to use photos, but if you do, try and make them as high res as possible. I mean, people are going to be looking at this, they want to know that you know what you're talking about and capable of showing good quality work there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as visual designers, it's definitely more of an expectation because we're being judged because we are being hired to do that work. I tended to get most of like my screen mockups from Unsplash, so it's a free stock photo resource, and then I just Photoshop my screens into the photos. which is a strategy to get high res stuff. I liked Sierra's approach of like, you know, focusing on like skimmable headline copy. If you don't have a lot of visuals to share, you can use typography instead to really, you know, kind of create hierarchy and draw people's attention to certain things. Think about the visuals as like helping you, you know, tell your story. So everything should be in support of that story that you're telling. You know, if wireframes are not relevant to the story you're telling, you don't need to include them unless it adds something to the process that you're telling. And then like a lot of my work, you know, I just focus on what's in my control. Okay, well, I had high fidelity screen mockups. So the deliverables that I'm going to show at the end of my portfolio are just going to be those screen mockups. If you're talking about like the photos in those mockups, yeah, I tend to get a lot of just free stock photos off the internet. So.
Great, thank you. Before we go, I don't know if you remember, but we started this series as compensation for the fact that we're learning online, we're learning remotely, and it's not, you know, it does have some downsides, and so we thought this would be a little bonus to make up for that. And I hope that you've enjoyed this and these others as much as we have. And I imagine, I don't know, don't want to put words in your mouth to Ariel, Maria, and Tai, but like, why didn't we do this for you guys? Right?
Yeah.
This has really been great. So thank you so much for spending this time with us. And I guess to everybody else, should we keep going and do more like this? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. We'll do that. Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we will be seeing some of you again, I think later this week, in fact. So again, thanks for coming, and a big giant thanks to Maria and Tai and Ariel and Sierra for being the stars of the show today.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks,
yes,
everybody.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye.